The DP Pep Talk. Copyright Sean O'Connor, 2016. Please note that the medical information contained within this document is not intended as a substitute for consultation with a professional physician and is not a recommendation of specific therapies. Welcome to the DP Pep Talk. This is an extremely powerful recap of some of the major issues that you need to know about your recovery from depersonalization. You can listen to this whenever you like, but I would personally recommend using it in the mornings and before bedtime. And a really good idea is to put it on repeat on your music player as you drift off to sleep. I'm going to go over some of the most important things that you need to know about depersonalization, the false beliefs about the condition, and why you can and will get better. I will go through this step by step and discredit all of the negative thoughts you might have that give anxiety and depersonalization any credence at all. Okay, so there's a few things you need to be aware of first. Firstly, you need to understand that depersonalization is not nearly as serious as you think. Does that come as a shock to you? Maybe it does, but that's not surprising. It came as a shock to me when I first realised it. That's right. All of the fear, all of the frustration, the abject terror of what you might be feeling is based on something that, well, to be honest, isn't actually a terribly serious thing to have. And not only that, but it's actually not that difficult to get out of either. You see, depersonalization is not an organic brain disease. It's not something that needs surgery or physical therapy. It's nothing close to being as serious as something that requires those types of solutions. So, what is it? Well, I'm glad you asked. Okay, here we go. All depersonalization is a symptom of anxiety. That's all. It is absolutely not, I repeat, not a standalone condition. It can't be. It simply cannot be. And I know, I've seen people on discussion boards say things like, well, I've gotten over the anxiety, but I'm still stuck with the depersonalization. But that's a fallacy in itself. It's like saying, well, I've gotten over the flu, but my nose is still running. I'm still sneezing, and I've got a headache. Can you see what I'm trying to say? Depersonalization is a symptom of anxiety. It's an anxiety-based disorder, and that's all it is. It cannot exist on its own. It needs to feed off anxiety in order to exist at all. I have never met or heard of a single person who felt depersonalized and totally calm at the same time. It simply cannot happen. It's like somebody who claims that they've given up smoking but goes around reeking of cigarettes all the time. And look, I'm certainly not saying that the people on the boards are lying or anything. It's probably just that their definitions of what being calm is has changed. For somebody who suffers from intense anxiety 24/7, just sitting in front of the television, feeling depersonalized but not totally freaking out, could be constituted as feeling calm. But of course, that's not calm at all by normal standards. And normal standards would tell you that if you felt depersonalized at all, then you're not completely calm and you're feeling anxious. And of course, that's absolutely correct, because as I've said, the depersonalization is a symptom of the anxiety. That's all it is. Okay? So, all of the horrible existential thoughts that you might have, all of the feelings of things not being real, the whole thing, every last thought, no matter how scary or how disturbing, is based completely, 100% on anxiety, with no exceptions. Depersonalization is a symptom of anxiety and nothing more. The only reason that there seems to be this kind of supposed separation between anxiety and depersonalization is because A, the forums on the internet tend to discuss it as such, and B, because the medical community tends not to discuss depersonalization very much at all. And there are very good reasons for both. People who sit and post on depersonalization internet forums, though they do so with the utmost sincerity and the best of intentions, are nonetheless confirming to themselves every single time that they do it that they are, in fact, sick. And that's what anxiety feeds off. And, like it or not, There is a tendency among groups of sufferers of certain disorders to, in a way, glorify their condition. How many times have you seen people on the internet forums say something like, well, I've had depersonalization for 6 months and it's so hard, only to have somebody reply in the same thread, 6 months, try 10 years. It almost becomes a kind of a contest. And the truth is that the guy who's had it for 10 years has probably been logging onto that forum every day for the vast majority of that time, thereby giving himself no chance to recover. And he, like so many others on the forums, speaks of the condition like it's a badge of honour. If you're doing that with an anxiety-based condition that inherently requires you to stay occupied and overwrite the habits associated with it, how can you ever expect to get better? And the worst part of all this is that when somebody develops the condition, for whatever reason, and they finally find the forums or support groups on the internet, they might be initially delighted to see that there are others who can relate to them. But then, all it takes is for them to see that one post by that one guy who has had it for 10 years, again, only because he's never addressed the problem properly, and then suddenly they think too that they could have it for 10 years, and get horribly depressed about the prospect of that length of time with the condition. I had that experience, and I know that so many of you have gone through the same thing. And if it's happened to you too, yeah, it sucks. But listen, don't worry about it. You're on the right track now. From now on, you're only going to do things that will be conducive to your recovery, and when you do that, you will recover. And I'll explain why in just a minute. But first, I want to quickly discuss the other point that I made earlier, which is, why doesn't the medical community tend to discuss depersonalization? If it's such a common condition, and yes, it's incredibly common, why isn't every family doctor on the lookout for it? Why is it that my family doctor didn't diagnose me with it, considering that I described it to him in words that, to anybody even vaguely familiar with the condition, would have to indicate depersonalization? Well, again, there's a very good reason for this. In fact, there are two. Firstly, the simple fact is that DP is hard to describe. Yeah, it's a simple problem, but there it is. If you've never heard of the condition before, attempting to explain it to somebody who has probably never heard of it either is often an exercise in futility. How frustrating is it to describe a feeling of being cut off from others, of having a pane of glass in front of you, of feeling like you're floating around, and at the same time, feeling terribly sad and lonely and anxious. Okay, maybe it's not that difficult for me to describe it to you now, but how difficult is it for the person who hears it but is unfamiliar with depersonalization? Usually, and this is based not just on my own experience, but on the thousands of emails I've received from people over the years, usually their doctor either tells them to simply perk up or tells them that they are in fact suffering from depression and prescribe them medication. Of course, this isn't an ideal situation at all, but you have to remember that a doctor can only diagnose to the best of their abilities. And also, unfortunately, there is a tendency in modern medicine to label many things under the umbrella of a diagnosis of depression. Which brings me to the second reason that depersonalization is not recognised more by the medical community, and it's this. The simple fact is that if a doctor diagnoses you as being anxious and or depressed, they're not entirely wrong. In fact, if a doctor tells you specifically that what you're suffering from is an anxiety disorder, then, well, he or she is actually correct. The problem you might see with the diagnosis is that, well, this isn't just anxiety, it's something different. I know what anxiety feels like, I've heard that before, but this feels weird. I actually feel disconnected from the world. This can't just be anxiety. And so, you immediately start to believe that your doctor has no clue at all as to what's actually going on with you. Sure, he can give you a general diagnosis, but in your heart, in your head, you're panicking. You're thinking, my doctor doesn't recognise what's wrong with me, so he's just telling me I have anxiety. Maybe I really am going crazy and he's just too afraid to tell me. Does any of that sound familiar? And yes, of course, that's a horrendous experience, and one that through my own experience and through the thousands of emails I've received is all too familiar to me. But here's the irony of the whole thing. If your doctor said to you that you have an anxiety disorder, they were actually right. They may not have recognized depersonalization as being a symptom, but because they addressed the condition as anxiety, they actually put their finger on the underlying problem. Now, for some people, that can actually be enough. Some people who get the condition seem to have an innate understanding that it is anxiety that drives it, and just the conversation with the doctor which confirms that, alone, can precipitate the person's recovery. But for others, those who believe that their doctor was wrong in diagnosing anxiety, or whose doctor diagnosed something else altogether, the panic and anxiety can escalate and continue for a long time based solely on the perceived impact of that one conversation with a doctor. Because if your doctor tells you that you were basically anxious, and you honestly think that that's wrong, which isn't your fault, because neither you nor your doctor are familiar with depersonalization, then that is setting you up for a fruitless search. Because it's in your head now that what you're experiencing is not anxiety, but something else, right? And if it's not anxiety, then what the hell is it? Now that's a scary question to ask about anything medical, right? I mean, if you saw some little green thing growing out of your foot and you didn't know what it was, and you didn't believe your doctor when he told you he knew what it was, well, that's a scary situation, right? But can you imagine if that what the hell is it moment was about an anxiety disorder? Something that actually feeds off of fear and self-analysis. What kind of horrible spiral would that send somebody on? Well, listen, you don't have to imagine it, because that's what's happened to you, okay? And that's all. In fact, I'm willing to bet that if you knew what depersonalization was when you first got it, you would have said, oh, weird, it's that depersonalization thing I read about. And you know what? It would have passed in a few minutes, if not seconds, because you knew that A, it's a perfectly natural anxious reaction, and B, you don't need to focus on it. Or if your doctor had said something like, oh yeah, that's depersonalization. All those feelings of being behind a pane of glass, of not being yourself, that's one of the most common symptoms of anxiety. Don't worry about it at all. It's a transient thing, and once the anxiety goes, that'll go too. Phew. For a moment there I thought you had something serious. If either of those things had happened, you would probably have had a very quick recovery very soon after the onset. I mean, if you had known in your heart and soul right there and then that what you were feeling was nothing to be scared of, that it's an extremely common symptom of anxiety, which is one of the most common medical complaints in the world, and that it never leads to anything worse than itself, that it's your brain's defense mechanism actually trying to protect you, and that there is quite literally nothing to be worried about, and that the only reason it persists at all is because you're worried about it? If you had known all of that, what do you think would have happened when you first felt depersonalization? I'll tell you what, you would have been interested in it for, I'd say, about a minute or two, and then you would have gotten back to what you were doing, and you would probably have never thought about it again. All of that brings me again to something else that's vital to note, and I'm going to be a broken record about this, because you have to understand that anxiety and depersonalization are not separate. I don't care what you've read in forums or what people who have had the condition for 10 years or more have told you. I'm coming to you from the position of somebody who is 100% better and who has been in contact with thousands of people who have also recovered. Retrospect is 2020, and I can tell you right here, right now, with years of recovery behind me, that depersonalization is nothing more than a symptom of anxiety. You have to understand and accept that. One question that I'm asked quite a lot in email correspondence is this: I'm wondering if there will ever be a point where I feel normal again. Now, the thing about that is that within that question is the key to recovering from depersonalization. Because if you think about it, nobody who feels normal really asks themselves that question. They just take it for granted. There's no specific state of normality that people can feel. Do you understand what I'm saying? They just keep themselves busy all the time. The normality is a byproduct of that. If they do ask themselves that question, they might dwell in it for a few seconds, and then they get distracted by their job, by the TV, by the song they're writing, by that hot guy or girl walking down the street, by the hundreds of things that are there to distract you each and every day. What happens if they decide to shut out the distractions and waste their time focusing repeatedly and constantly on the question, am I normal? Well, isn't that how anxiety conditions begin? Isn't that how you've been feeling? So there you go. And so the obvious thing to do here is the right thing to do. Stop asking yourself if you are feeling normal, and you will begin to feel normal again. Cultivate the habit of not focusing on yourself, and you will just be normal again. But like I've said before, you can't just wake up and decide that you're going to not ask yourself that question. The subconscious doesn't work in positives or negatives, so telling yourself not to think of something won't stop you from thinking about it. However, there is a proven way to do just that, and that's to keep your mind focused on other things all the time. That way, you will retrain your brain to just stop asking the question and not care about it anymore. Your brain will realize that it doesn't have to waste time doing that. And that's the whole point of the exercise here. Thinking about depersonalization at all is just a waste of time. You would gain just as much more insight into, say, the color red if you spent the entire day thinking about that instead. And you know what? After a couple of days, it would probably become just as frustrating and take just as much of a toll on your physical and mental health. I'll say it again. You've got to realize that thinking about depersonalization at all, positive or negative, is a total waste of time. And I mean, even if you think, I'm not feeling bad depersonalization at the moment, well, that's still a waste of time. To have this thing in your conscious and subconscious mind at all is utterly pointless. In fact, you should be treating your positive thoughts about the condition with a similar reaction as if you felt a panic attack coming on. That is to say, get yourself totally busy and immersed in something that occupies your hands and your mind. Do you understand? Now, of course, it's okay if you have these thoughts, be they positive or negative, and you will still experience them for a while. That's just the nature of habit. But what I'm saying to you is this. From now on, whether you have thoughts like either A, a negative thought, what if I have an intense attack of anxiety or depersonalization, or B, a positive thought, like, you know what, I'm starting to feel better. Whether you have either of these types of thoughts, they will both be your signal to get yourself completely occupied. Read a book, put on loud music, knit, play a video game, whatever. Any thought about depersonalization will from now on not be your permission to feel bad or good. It will simply be an alarm clock going off telling you to focus your mind on something fun and productive, something you love to do. If you do that, you absolutely, positively will get better, and there's a very simple reason for that statement. Depersonalization is a behavioral habit. That's all it is. And that's not a platitude. It's not just my opinion. It's a fact. Depersonalization is a symptom of anxiety, and anxiety is just a habit of behavior. Fact. And as such, it can be overwritten and stopped completely. When you put the work in, you will overwrite the negative thought habit and you will recover. And that's all there is to it. What you need to remember is that the anxiety that causes depersonalization can be initially generated by many different types of traumatic experience. A car crash, the loss of a loved one, a bad drug experience. But take my word for it, the end result is always the same. It's a self-defense mechanism of the brain that becomes overactive and stays longer than it should, but that is temporary in every single case if you know how to deal with it. There is no difference between you and me, or you and all of the thousands of people I personally know who have recovered completely. Look, there is nothing actually bad or evil about anxiety or depersonalization at all. It's nothing more than a defense mechanism that has become stuck, a protective system for the brain. And it's based on anchoring, on associational patterns. When your brain gets stuck in fight or flight mode, it anchors fear and negativity with pretty much everything it sees. However, when you keep your conscious mind occupied, when you keep it busy with tasks all the time, you stop thinking about the anxiety. The associational patterns lose their anchors, and you stop caring about them. And that's when you feel better. You just stop caring about feeling anxious because you know there are far more important things in life to be engaged in. When the work is put in, everyone can recover from depersonalization 100% with no exceptions. So get to work and enjoy your recovery.